For me, the ceramics is sort of, it's a material that I like to use. It's a material that I feel I can express myself with. I feel as if it's almost like an extension of the body. British sculptor Tony Craig had this very kind of simple way of describing the human relationship with clay, which is this simple sentence that just says, "When I move, the clay moves." So I think sort of in terms of like references in my work and constructs of my work, I think, I guess, equally of both sculpture and sort of ceramic history as being kind of part of the same sort of history, but with discrete kind of lineages. And so some of my work kind of quite directly engages with a notion of like ceramic history, so bowls or lamps or whatever else the ceramic material might have been used for in specific ways. But for me, it's interesting to kind of try to utilize these formats in a very kind of simple way, where you change a simple parameter and then have this object kind of behave in a different kind of way. So the exhibition, which was called You in Between, was, I think, sort of almost like a sort of kind of a conclusion to many of the things that I'd been thinking about sort of from 2003 onwards. In the sense that it was about sort of dealing with our specific relationships with objects. So the title was about sort of situating the audience as the central kind of character within the work, that the objects did not have meaning without audience, essentially, and the audience, in a sense, was kind of what made it happen. And so this was a 3-room exhibition. In the first room, there was a totally sort of brass mirrored room in which there were a number of objects kind of situated around. Some were utilizing kind of a traditional kind of symmetrical kind of setup. So you felt as if almost you're kind of going into some sort of notion of decoration. And then there were 4 objects on a podium, that this podium slowly kind of spinned around. And so by that, the podium essentially kind of got into kind of how we perhaps see objects situated more in a shop-like situation. For me, my work is really not about having people understand what I think about the work. It's about people coming with their own history and possibly knowing a little bit about what I do, but really kind of trying to make sense of what they're presented with. In the second room, then you walk into a sort of a central structure in which there is an object that has a convex mirror fitted into it. And so you come into this small sort of enclosure. It's almost like a viewing booth or something like that, in which you're only kind of confronted with an object that reflects yourself. And so by that, it even sort of emphasizes more it's about the sort of personal relationship between the one audience and the one object. The rest of the objects are sort of formally playing around with object categories, some of them like lights, some of them like tables, some of them like sort of IKEA, like box furniture and those sort of things, but in a very kind of simple, minimalist kind of language, but singular objects that seem to fit into the sort of middle space between sort of design and sculpture, possibly. And then in the last room, which was a room that was called, it was called You in Between, so actually from the exhibition title itself, and that was a sort of a double lineup of objects in which I created like a series of kind of objects that were glazed in either blue or orange glazes and rendered in 2 different ways. One was a very kind of high precision, kind of clear rendering. The other one was very mottled and finger marked. They were situated in such a way that you come into the room and you see only one lineup of objects. Then there's a sort of a ribbon curtain that goes through the space, or double ribbon curtain that goes in, and those ribbon curtains are just far enough away so you can't actually kind of open both at the same time. And so the idea behind this was essentially trying to have sort of two similar lineup of objects that at least had the same forms but rendered in different ways, and they were flipped in the way that they were colored as well. And so by that you sort of had to remember one object in order to see the other, and essentially what I was trying to kind of do is to get sort of in the mind rather than with the sort of physical kind of comparison, having one thing and looking the other and figuring out, but essentially kind of trying to sort of map that in your mind as such. And so it's a way of sort of essentially getting into the audience mind in a sort of psychological way through objects.